Now we are back to the inner drawing. There's still some work to be done on the background, but I think that might come on you know maybe Friday. Then finishing touches, fixing things up. Like the city here is going to need some more texturing. I might use the several the bundle of pencils brush to texture it and then layer inheritance to color some of those sketchy lines in a different way. Do I draw with my shoulders or wrists? Depends. Actually, let's go back to the gesture drawing for a while. This has empty area that I can use to doodle on. I think that talking about drawing with the shoulder or wrist is a bit misleading. I would say drawing with the hand or the whole arm. So, for example, here I am not moving my wrist. Of course, naturally, there's a natural curve. So if you work with your wrist while drawing with only your hand, you will be able to get some very nice and consistent curves in your work. Of course, if you are, let's say, you are trying to draw a long line and you are just moving your wrist a little bit and 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 a little bit, it might be that the single segments here are going to be relatively good on their own. So as a, let's say, a percentage difference from the line tool, it's probably going to be relatively constant whether or not I have used the entire arm or if I have looked at it like this. So my answer is both. It depends on what I am doing. This is also something that I noticed after getting a larger tablet that is stuck on the table and I cannot take it in my lap as I did with the older, smaller one. I find that let's say talking about writing, it was easier for me to write on the other tablet as I was able to move it with my other arm so that I was only writing with my hand. The thing is that if I am writing with my whole arm, as I sort of have to, if I want to draw on this scale, you see the difference in the handwriting quality. I think this is probably a reason for the famous, medical doctor handwriting, as stereotypically they will be writing on the run or on the move and will not have the kind of stability that you need to write with your wrist. So if I try to write with my wrist in the air, you notice that this is not particularly helpful. And as I said, I think that's probably a major contributor to the classic, doctor's handwriting. So, in summary, if you are, trying to draw a large movement or have this kind of a flowing structure to your line, you should use your entire arm. Of course, if you have a tiny, like an A6 drawing tablet or you're drawing on a small notepad or something, then it is physically impossible to use this kind of large arm movements. This so corner to corner, this tablet is larger than my forearm from elbow to middle finger. The previous one was much smaller, so this kind of thing was more difficult. And then if you are going to be like tracing, inking a very detailed outline, then you are better off docking your hand to the screen or paper and using your hand as if you were writing. If I keep my hand up, I will under no circumstances be able to draw anywhere near that detailed. And of course, conversely, if you do dock your hand to the screen, you will not be able to produce the sort of aggressive, bold movements. So to have another, weird pseudo summary, if you are sketching, like if you are making this kind of very aggressive movements, then use your whole arm. And then when you come back to it, and you want to actually detail this in, then I would suggest that you use your hand to draw it. So both depending on what I'm doing. And I would suggest this to you watching as well. So now we are getting into this actual drawing. Check down the opacity here a bit. Start a new group called character. And I am going to have several groups here as well. I'm going to try to manually save a bit more. I have turned off the reference Docker, which has known crash problems. So hopefully we are not going to have these new layer crashes today. Unfortunately, if that is the source of the crashes, then we will also not be able to use that function. It's unfortunate because it's I think it's a very useful function. So the I think we already have a sketch layer here. I'm going to put one in anyway. I might not need it, but it's going to be there if I need it. And then there's going to be an anatomy group, and within the anatomy group, I am going to start out with bones, and then go into the muscles. So I think I will have to use a much smaller brush here. Yeah, I think 5 pixels is going to be all right. With the amount of things happening in this drawing, it might have been a good idea to start with a larger canvas as well. I can always scale it up, but the quality is not going to go up. Of course, it's just going to be an upscaled version of the original one. But as the idea is not really to have a minutely detailed landscape, and the character doesn't really have to be minutely detailed either, I think this image size is going to be all right. So we are going to, maybe I'll use the sketch group as my volumetrics group. How unfortunate, I had a group within a group. That's not how it's supposed to work. So here we are. At this point, I'm going to have to decide the angle of the arm here. It is going to be rotated towards the outside a bit, as I have already drawn it here. That will also allow me to drawing this kind of midpoint is going to help me. No, I think it has to be even larger. So if we want, let's say, a double width as compared to the height of the bounding box, it's going to be something like this. Then we are going to need another one on this side. This is going to be slightly angled away from the body as well. On this side, we are going to have much less of the bounding box visible because it is, we are looking not quite as directly at it. As a result, the difference in scale here is not quite as large, but it is still closer to us, so it will be larger on our side. So speaking of whether or not I am using my hand or my whole arm, for these lines I was using my whole arm. So then a thing to remember is that the length of this part of the body here is often, let's say it's, if you look up one of those ideal bodies in an anatomy textbook, it is going to be identical. But for some people, it is not going to be identical. A lot of people are not, so to say, ideal. Very few are, actually. So we have an interaction here and here. I like to draw kind of a ball here to, try to get at the angles again. And then we are going to have another bounding box, but this time for the, I'm going to draw it for the entire arm, as the length of the upper arm is the same as the length of the lower arm, including the palm. So if the hand was straight, the knuckles would be here, and this length would be the same as the length of the upper arm from the shoulder bone to the peak of the elbow. And this is I think we are still very, very weakly looking at it from above. At this point, I think ideally I might have the ball on a different layer, but I'm being a bit lazy here. So I am going to just erase some of it. So here, all of this has been drawn using just with my hand, wrist docked to the screen. And then all of this is with the entire arm. And again, I think if the wrist was unturned, it would be up until here. And extremely slightly turned towards us. And much more down here. Another sort of a tip and trick, if you are trying to get a line between 2 points and you are for some reason you don't want to use the line tool, maybe you are an analog weirdo like me, or maybe you don't have maybe you have some technical reason not to do it. When you start from one side and move towards the other, usually one side of the line is going to be the starting side of the line is going to be closer to what you want it to have than the end of the line. Of course, here I managed to do just as good of a job with one line, so my quick demonstration was an abject failure. So the next thing to mark is going to be the third way. Point up these blocks here. That is going to be about where the wrist is, and that fits the. I'm using my fingers here as a short measurement. It seems to fit fairly well. So the thing is that getting into measurements again, I really shouldn't talk about anatomy while I am trying to draw. It leads into endless tangents, but hopefully it's useful for people who are watching. I like to use these balls. Like one ball is the approximate volume of the skull. And when you have two of those, that is the length of the forearm and palm. And a further ball is going to be the palm and the fingers. And there's a traditional unit that maybe a span in English. Those old Roman units and things like that. So certainly for me, it is the case that the span between the thumb and the middle finger is also more or less the size of the head. The span of the between the thumb and the little finger is also very close. So I think for this kind of anatomically ideal person, you might think of them as identical. For me, it is not quite. The span from thumb to little finger is slightly larger. It's like 1.5 centimeters longer. As a percentage, that's going to be notable. But anyway, nobody is actually going to have the ideal, classical ideal body composition in any case. So you can just use this kind of, rules of thumb to take quick measurements, use your own body for reference for proportions on a character that you're drawing. So I guess if you really wanted Mm. My impression is that for me, it's not quite. It's more like a 1/3 than like the way that I have drawn it here. Logically, it should be a fourth of the way down, or 3/4 of the way up. But my impression, the feeling that I have of my own body is that for me it's more like 1/3 of the way through. And of course, that ends up being the way that I draw when I am not concentrating on drawing a character with specific proportions. So if you were drawing a cartoonish bodybuilder, for example, you might give them massive hands. That seems like a classic macho thing. You might exaggerate the size of the fist, for example, into something absurd like this. But let's get back into the actual drawing here. So we are going to have I'm not going to use red for this. I'm going to find another color. Maybe try to use purple. This is going to be the upper body. So the trunk, I think, is the most accurate technical term for it. The part with all your chest bones in it. And as we know, Ina is actually a very thin, slim character. So in this case, using a thin ice crystal or salt crystal like this is going to be useful to keep to correct proportions. Actually, I'm going to have to erase some of that. Because the mistake I did here was that I started drawing the entire body as a bounding box, which is something that I have done as well. The thing is that your actual body has the spine curves like this. So for what I am thinking of here, I want to draw this part here as one of these, volumetric ice crystals again. And for that, the angle between that and this, of course, exists. So what I might want to do, actually, is to start with the outside center line. And then walk it up. And then not start with the crosses at the ends, but rather start with a volume cross section across the sternum here. And then start working on the crystals structure here. And then, of course, the next section would be this one. I'm not going to change the color, but I am going to change the layer for it. Again, when you use this absurd amount of layers, you will be able to erase a specific part of the drawing without affecting anything else. It turns out that I relatively rarely actually end up erasing things. I mostly just draw more on top of it. But it's kind of a psychological crutch for one, but it works for me. So I can sort of recommend it on that basis. Maybe it will be actually useful if you do a lot of erasing. Maybe it will be useful because it just feels easier to do it that way. Who knows? So here we have a relatively weak angle between these. I think that this is, makes sense for someone who is sitting like this. So if you are going to be sitting, if you want to sit with a large angle here, you really have to pull yourself up. There are techniques to do this, like I am. I'm going hog wild with the anatomy again here. So you have a certain angle here, naturally, and if you are, bending forward, you might have a constant curve to your back. But I'm switching between these poses as I speak, which is of course not going to help you because you cannot see it. But depending on if I am leaning my non-drawing arm on the table here, or if I am perched, if it is perched on my knee, how would I draw this? Okay, I have my knees here. And when I have my hand perched here, so it is going to the side and then down, this gives me a sort of back angle like this. So this is a better, healthier back angle for one, and I think that it looks good. You can find this in a lot of old photographs, for example. I think that in general, people who are, just sitting down, not really thinking all that much about it, are going to be slightly bent forwards. And because of that, they are going to have a small angle here. Smaller than they would if they were sitting up, if they were, making a pose, really, sitting in the army, like for example. That's another one of those things. We had to do this stupid thing where you'd have your fists on your knees here. So that's also something that forces you to sit up with a, militaristic posture. But I think in this case, the character is going to have a relatively weak angle here, and I think that's going to be perfectly fine and realistic. There's a bit of a twist here. This is intentional. I want there to be a bit of twist. So she will be turning her body slightly into the wind. So legs are pointing this way, and her upper body is pointing, a little bit to stage right. Now, because these are the same color, I cannot really differentiate between which I want to use here. So I'm just going to, sort of bullshit my way up here. These are going to have similar angles as the previous ones here. So it's going to end up being something like this. It's a bit of a mess here, but I think it's going to work out well enough. So At this point, we have reached the legs. This bounding box is going to... The point at the bottom of the bounding box is where the tip of the tailbone comes up. So that is way further down than where the legs actually attach. The legs attach about in the middle of the hip bone. So the pivot point for the legs is actually going to be somewhere up here. As you can see, that is also roughly where I had drawn the legs before. And at this point, I am going to draw in some triangles so that I can try to get at the mid-height line between the last, white part of the crystal here, and that is where I want to sort of have the edge of my bounding box for the leg. The leg is quite thick, as we know. It's what keeps us moving, so it has to be relatively thick. Here we get into some measurements again. So this to this, so the let's say the direct length of the thigh bone, which is however not straight, it is angled, so the bone in itself is going to be a bit longer, but the effective length of the upper leg is going to be either or this is what I would use as a character design edge cases for it. Either all the way up to the shoulder, above the shoulder, or below the shoulder. So this would be the armpit, and this would be up to the clavicle. Looking at actual existing people, my experience is that these are the edge cases. I have very long legs. Mine come up to here. The official design for Ina has absurdly long legs. They would come up to maybe somewhere around the nose, or even to the flaps. If I wanted to be extremely on model, I should do that, but I tend towards somewhat more realistic construction, so I am going to use the top of the shoulder level for her. In many cases, people will have their legs come up to their armpits. That's probably something that you would take as the average person proportion, and only use the clavicle length for people who you are consciously drawing with long legs. So I sort of did this yesterday as well. I am going to sort of optically transfer the length, so I end up with something like this. And of course I have to move everything to the side, since it's excuse me, is actually, of course, from the insertion. I am going to do some erasing here for once, and I might have to do some changes here. So what we actually want to have is starting at the hip joint here, we want to come up to the clavicle. I am thinking it is going to be up here. So this is the length that we have in the position where we want to have it. And then I am going to try to move this. Yeah, it's almost exact. It lands almost exactly where I want to have it. So it's going to be here. And since the leg is pointed inwards a little bit, I am going to move it a bit to the side, and of course it has to move to the back because it is actually rotating, so it ends up around here. So very close to where I had drawn it originally, but not identical. So question, what resources do I use to learn for? I interpret this as what resources did I use to learn these kind of things. For me, as a person whose age starts with a 3, that's a difficult question to answer because I have been at this for a relatively long time. I actually started drawing in middle school as I wanted to impress a girl in my middle school class. I had a varied history with this. I've worked as an art model for art classes when I was as a student. I've used some books to learn from. I've done some of my own, looking at things. It's at this point it's difficult for me to tease apart where exactly the information is coming from. Starting from scratch. That's a good question. I'm going to think about it and probably, end up maybe babbling about it a little bit throughout the stream, and then maybe I might I'm going to pause drawing for a little bit while I'm so that I'm not thinking and talking and drawing at the same time. It's a little bit too much multitasking. I have a bit of a notepad here somewhere on the table with topics for streams for this week, and a lot of it is just doing this project and all of the relatively advanced things to go with it. But I have 5 topics here, and so that with that I would be done on Friday. I have also considered having a bit of a morning stream on Saturday as a tryout for once work starts up again next week. I was thinking that previously I often had I was in the mood to stream in the morning, but when the evening came around, it was more difficult for me to start, or did not have the I was not in the mood to do it anymore. So I've been thinking that I might start doing regular Saturday morning drawing streams. So if I make an extra stream that's not going to necessarily be connected to this project, I could start. I could have the topic for that be something like starting when drawing for beginners. I'm not an educator in this topic, so I don't know if it would be particularly useful. But things like elementary proportions, like let's say drawing stick figures with volume, that kind of thing. I think, from my point of view, volume is the number one. If you can give your drawing a sense of volume, it doesn't have to be detailed at all for it to look good and carry the meaning that you want to communicate. I am, of course, very familiar with the anatomy. That's a very wide topic. I have had some art books, so Anatomy for the Artist by some Hungarian professor that I used to look at and draw from when I was in high school and as a student. There are probably some, these days there are probably some pretty good YouTube tutorials for that. I think giving us, thinking up a sort of, schematic volumes for the body, so as you don't have to think about the muscles. So, like if you want to draw just a person, what kind of cross sections do different parts of the body have? For example, the upper, what kind of blocks? Like if you imagine yourself drawing a block figure, like a Lego man or something, but more detailed, what kind of blocks would it have? Like for example, the upper leg is going to have the adductor muscles on the inside here. And I think if you draw like if you were to draw just the salt crystals and then add the adductor, I think you are going to have a good volume for a leg for beginning artists. You don't have to get absurdly detailed with the anatomy to have a functional, nice, drawing for fun, drawing fan art or something like that. So that's actually probably a pretty good idea for the Saturday stream if I am still in the mood to do that. All right, now that I am somewhat more done with the thinking, I am going to move on into the other leg. So this leg is going to be angled somewhat down and somewhat in from the other leg, since it has to be going under it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, sort of copy the angle. And then I am going to draw in the arrows again. So it has to go a little bit down. It has to go a little bit stage left to her inside. This is getting a bit messy in here again. I think the midpoint is going to be somewhere around here. I think I drew it, but no, it seems that I didn't, or I did a bad job at it. So let's add one here. It's going to be around here. So let's say the midline is going to be in this direction, but it is going to end up not being quite as long, because of course when it angles down, angles inwards, it's going to lose some length. I think it's going to have to angle even a little bit more inwards. And then we are going to need some, angle again, a little bit angled outside. Not quite that much, more like this. Somewhere in this mess of lines. I think that's going to be all right for now. So that is going to be more or less the upper leg. And I am going to go back to red color. And again, once again, some proportions. Depending on the person, you might want to have the upper leg and the Actually, I'm going to draw this off to the side again so I don't mess myself up here. So you're going to have the angle here is exaggerated. It's going to be more like this. You want to have the effective length of the upper leg. Again, comes up either to the armpit or the clavicle. And then it is going to go down to either the ankle or the bottom of the foot. This is depending on how long the legs on this person are. Generally, men have proportionally shorter legs. So if you are drawing a male character, you might want to draw the upper leg as the same length as the lower leg. I personally have the same length for my... I think it's going to be this length, and this length are going to be the same for me. I know this because as a student I had my bones measured for a research project. I have also had my DNA sequenced for a research project, so I am relatively, up to date on my biology. So as anthropologists measure bones, I have a longer shin bone than a thigh bone. I was the only person in the group measured to have this as a man. But there are, the stereotypical attractive woman is going to have long shins. It's also the reason why women wear heels, so that they look like they have long shins. I'm going to draw Ina again with, so part laziness, part because, she is a long-legged character, with my own proportions. So the same optical length for the upper leg as for the lower leg until the ankle. So getting back to work. I'm going to, draw a ball for the interaction again. I'm going to end up erasing this, but it's nice to have it. So now what is the center line going to be? Now let's assume that we end up around here, as I had already drawn it. So the center line is something like this. The angle isn't that dramatic. It's going to be slightly turned down, but this leg is going to... I'm making the pose with my legs, as I often do. It is going to be turned slightly inwards as well. So if we just continue on this line here, it is going to be slightly down of that, and I would say notably inward. So where do we actually end up? Somewhere around here. The thing is that what is going to be the length of it? We want to have a similar length as here. And that seems fine. So I think this is going to be more or less correct. You see me here doing sort of, ballparking the measurements by, drawing this kind of bold curves. That's something that I like to do. It's not particularly, measurable. You don't really get a numerical value, but you sort of get a a feeling of it if it's more or less correct. And I think if you want to have fun drawing, then having this kind of, kind of all right methods that are fast to use is going to be more valuable than having methods that are, immediately, that are very robust, but not fun to use. So, because of this rotation inwards, we are going to have less of this end of the salt crystal visible than we did for some of the other parts here. I think this is actually a very good time to actually rotate the canvas. Another one of those tips and tricks. Your body has movements that it is either more used to making or that are just easier for it anatomically to begin with, and you want to take advantage of that. So, getting back to army stories, there was a guy there who had been, for some reason, had been told by early educators that the fact that he was rotating the paper as he was drawing was some sort of a sign of a mental deficiency. It's completely absurd. That's the opposite of the truth. So when he saw me constantly rotating my paper on the table, he felt himself validated, as he had never agreed with this assessment either. And speaking of early educators, I was supposed to be mute because there are a couple of different ways that children begin to speak. Some of them, just start babbling words and make sentences that are not grammatically correct, but that are understandable to their parents. And some of them work on their, sentence level structure. They will babble things that are not comprehensible, but that are somehow, I'm not an expert on this topic, so I don't know how it works. They somehow practice the rhythm and that kind of thing for speaking, and then suddenly start speaking at a later age with entirely, complete grammatically correct sentences. So I'm that type. Apparently, at some point I was looking up, papers on early age language learning, since I live abroad and might some they have children abroad that I would like to teach my language to. And it turns out that, at least in that branch, this is extremely common knowledge. So the early educators were simply not particularly well educated in their topic, unfortunately. Interestingly, these differences do not manifest later in life. So the fact that I am very good at learning languages is not correlated and is extremely unlikely to be anyway connected with the fact that I learned grammar for my native language before learning the words. Although it is a funny coincidence that is exactly how I like to learn foreign languages as well. So, getting back to work, we have a crash here. No, I am going to save. I have successfully saved. There's something wrong here. No, now it's working again. So, refreshing the drawing area worked. Oh, comment about language learning. Baby is crying in rising or falling tones. That's an interesting topic as well. Not something that I would have run into in my writing at that point. What I've heard is, that language learning begins in the womb. So hearing their native language even before they are born through, I don't know if it's through, how much of it is general environmental and how much of it would be their mother. So I imagine that the baby is far enough from the organs that produce sound that it probably doesn't get the sound directly through the body of the mother. But I might be wrong there. In that case, it would have to be a sort of um, general environment that you would like to have your child have a general environment that includes your language if you are not living in a country where that's a majority language. So, for example, I imagine that I would then try to get my wife to listen to music in my language. And of course, it would probably be a good idea to try to talk to the baby or talk as much as possible in my language around my wife, which in any case, I probably would do anyway, as I would exclusively speak my language to the child. So it would be a great idea for her to practice understanding it as well, if not speaking it fluently. And of course, since I was talking and thinking and drawing at the same time, I made a bit of a mistake here with the angles. Um, of course, I did not want my leg to be going perfectly straight. I want it to be angled down at the knee, in addition to all of the changes in the um, from the positioning here. So we want to have it sort of going into the camera here, because it's going to be, angled more like this instead of just going straight. So some, extra problems. How is this going to work? It's going to move in that direction. These things here are going to get a bit smaller. So here, another demonstration of working with angles on an intuitive level. It's going to end up here, and then I think more like this. So it's going to end up a bit further back here, and then offset slightly to stage right. I think that's going to be where I want my ankle to be. I have the intuition that you should have this kind of a visual angle here as well. This is as usual for me. This is turning out to be quite a difficult pose to actually draw. Is it going to be something like this? At this point, I have devolved entirely into just, testing it out. What happens if I draw it like this? What happens if I draw it like this? This is typically the way that, fan artists and hobbyists generally draw. I've never been particularly good at doing things this way. And of course, falling back to it when things get hard to do methodically is a particularly bad solution. I think it's going to have to be further up here. So this angle here This looks more or less like what I want. Yeah, luckily I can just check down the opacity on that and start again a little bit. So I think this is going to be where I want it to be. So something like this. I think that looks, if we remove the sketch, yeah, I think that looks all right to me. Ah, hello Fleur. Something has hit the Nightbot. I haven't actually configured it a lot, so I don't know what actually happened. Maybe your raid message? But welcome. I was thinking that if you were still streaming when I finished, I'd raid you, but turns out this way is fine as well. So for those of you who might not be familiar with me, I have traditionally done some, more academic streams, and currently I am drawing. This is now the second session. Yesterday I sort of finished drawing a background while also demonstrating layer inheritance and different, technical methods for drawing inside the lines. And this time I'm working on some volume. So that's why I have this sort of bounding box for the character here. Seems that Nightbot is extremely angry today. So today's topic is more about volumes and things like that. Not everything out, just a sketch out. Yeah, it seems that the standard settings are quite aggressive. I should probably configure it a little bit now that there's been a problem with it. I mostly doesn't allow emote spamming either. I mostly picked it up to get the SciTube links. So if you want to listen to some Toho swing beats while listening to me or while watching me draw, that's what the bot is actually for. So the other lower leg, this one is going to be rotated slightly as well, and it is going to be passing under the other leg, and I have to make this pose again. It's going to have a much more aggressive angle to it, almost like this. So for those new who are still watching, I am demonstrating and using sort of a self-invented method of drawing this kind of long salt crystals as a proxy for the volume of the body of a person. So I'm drawing this sort of crosses and lines and crystal endpoints to mark the angle that I want different parts of the body to be at in proportion with each other. Probably going to be something like this. So here we are going to need the length again. So we want to have the same length here. If I was just, if it was pointed just straight down, it would be more like this. But the leg is moving towards us, so it loses some, visual length, because it is, is visually getting larger. So I think that the original length here is about right, but I think it should be further stage left. So I am going to draw it something like this. And of course, since it is moving towards us, it has to be getting larger, but not necessarily that aggressively. And this is actually going to be relatively flat against the camera. So the endpoints here are going to be relatively broad. So something like this. All right. So then I am going to erase some of the helping lines here to keep things a little bit less cluttered. And I think then it's I am going to move into the feet and the hands, and then the final step for the volume sketch is going to be the head. So another color yet again. Let's go back to blue. So when you come down on the leg, you have two bones there. So seen from the front, you have the major bone, which curves quite a bit, and then it ends up being the outside bone, the inside bone here. So this is the other leg is going to be here, and then you have a smaller spindly bone here, and that goes much more straight, and it ends up being the outside bone. And this width here is already the width of the ankle, and basically the width of the back part of the foot as well. So you might be tempted to draw a sort of a small ankle here, but really, if you are drawing a volume of the ankle, it is going to be the width of both of these bones. As seen from the side, I like to draw it as sort of a, half puck, and then have some, structure to the back, structure to the front, and then a toe cap. The outline is going to end up more like something like this. So for that, I am going to draw kind of a cylinder inside here. And that is going to be where the ankle attaches. It's not quite right with the angles here. This is where the cross on the shoulder crystal helps again. You can check and compare these angles with each other. So the foot is going to be angled down, and we are going to have let's say something like this. Even more. It's going to be more or less flat on the ground. So we are actually going to want our bottom something like to land something like this. So we are going to end up with the puck going something like this, and then expand it backwards and expand it forwards. and then we want, you know, some space for the toe, and then we want to probably do some measuring. It's another one of those places where you easily end up with a foot that is much too small. Let's widen it up a little bit first. It's going to be helpful in the long run. It's wider on the outside. That is not the outside. This is a classic mistake. The legs are crossed, so the outside is on this side. So this side is actually the one where we want to have more volume. So the proportional volumes are looking fine to me. Then let's try to find out if the foot is about the correct size again. This here is going to be another one of those, you know, volumes of the skull. And the lower leg here is going to be 3 of those. This is going to be 1. We would like to have 1, 2, 3. And then we would like to have, seems fine, right? Seems correct to me. And then we are going to need the other foot. This is going to be more difficult again. It's a difficult pose. We are going to have some coming down here. Something like this. This part will not be visible to us. How do we actually want it? I think lying flat on its edge against the ground is going to be what I want for it. So actually it has to be angled clearly down again. So the angle is going to end up being more like this here. Again, it needs to get a little bit larger as we approach. And a bit smaller back there on the other side. I think at this point, now this is just plain too confusing here. I'm going to have to maybe turn down the opacity on that so that we can still somewhat see it, but that it doesn't confuse me as I am working on this one. No, I am now drawing on the wrong layer. Drawing on the wrong layer is another one of those classic mistakes as well. And then we need some toe room again. And it's going to be comparatively larger at the side that's interacting with the ground. So I think that's from the form. Looking at the form, that's going to be more or less correct. The problem is that I think it is now too large. Let's turn the whiteout sketch away. It is, or at least it feels like it is now larger than the other foot, and this is not the case that we want to have. We would like it to be more or less the same size. course, it has a bit of a more difficult angle and perspective to it. I think that's going to be about the correct size and position and so on for it. Yeah, seems fine. So what we are still missing is the hands and the heads, and after that I will do a quick job of drawing in some anatomy. I think we'll land at something like 11 a.m. or noon time for me, and that's going to be just fine to finish at today. So we have the wrist here. Yeah, blue is going to be a good color for this, and we want something like this as already drawn. And on this side, it's going to be a bit more like this, so a more extreme angle towards the camera. Maybe size it up a bit on this side. And then, of course, since we are moving into the camera, things have to be getting smaller here. I think that's going to be pretty good. Something like this for the palm. And on the other side, there is some of the same, but not quite as much, I think. So we are going to end up with the volume of the palm of something like this. I think both of these are looking relatively good. The problem starts with the fingers, since the fingers are turned away from us. But that will not be a massive problem. Fingers are always difficult to draw. And this at this scale, the fingers are going to barely be visible at all. At least I'm going to even start a new group for the fingers. So change the color again. I'm going to take a purple. I'm probably going to need a blue, red here with the fingers as well. So when you have your hands turned like this, the thumbs are on the outside. It's getting kind of blocky here. I wonder if I'm running out of memory or something. I'm going to save for security. I might have to, combine some of the background layers to save some, computational capacity. I have an absurd amount of layers here for, obvious reasons. But once I'm done, for example, with the volumetrics, I can just merge all of the volume layers together and save up some space like that. So we have the thumb. The palm in itself is yeah, we are having some sort of a technical issue here. Kind of I guess a minimum amount of motion that's allowed. Do I have something that I can completely merge here? I think I think the rough is all going to be not a problem. There's a merge below, there's not a merge together. Well, I'm going to select all of these and merge them with the layer below. That ended up with them merged. So if you have a group and you merge with layer below, they just merge together. So let's see if that helped us at all. It seems to have helped. So it seems that there's a bit of a technical limitation to how many layers you can have, or that I can have with my computer, at least. So the palm in itself is composed of the first finger bones. So the thumb as well begins at the place where all of the other finger bones start as well. But it is the only one that is able to move outside of the meat of the palm. But I don't think the thumb is going to be visible behind the palm at all. So I don't think it's going to be well founded to draw it. Perhaps, yeah, I think on this hand it's going to be slightly visible. Then I'm going to use the red for the long fingers. I draw in these sort of dots for the fingers. And then ideally, of course, you do the whole same song and dance with the salt crystals for the each articulating component of the fingers. At this scale, it's just not going to make any sense to do it. I'm going to draw the fingers as like a series of blocks here. And then if any of it is actually visible in the final drawing, I'm just going to wing it. I think little, if any, is going to be visible with the brim and all of the other things here. Yeah. So next up is going to be the head. What do we have here? We have the head. The neck is slightly rotated to stage left, and the head and the neck is slightly turned back. So again, going with the kind of a salt crystal form for the connection with the neck. This is going to be something like this. It is going to be slightly rotated. So here we are going to have something more like this. Seems fine to me. And of course, what you have to remember with the neck, which I will draw with the head, is that the neck attaches at the hairline. This is the eyebrows. This is about the nose and mouth, and then you have the jaw here. So the cranium is not actually shaped like a ball, even if you like to use this kind of a ball to get at the rough volume of it. The cranium is not actually a ball, and where the neck attaches is here at this level. So now when I want to start working on the head itself, I'm not going to be drawing a ball on top of this here. What I actually want is that this is going to be this level here. Getting back to the cross sections from the demonstration phase again. So I'm going to draw a ball that is perhaps 1/3 of its way down when it hits this cross section. It's a bit of trial and error. And we would like to have it be 1/2 of this size. So it needs to be a little bit bigger. a little bit bigger than that, but otherwise it's relatively good. So I think that's going to be more or less all right. So this is going to end up being around the nose line. So I'm going to start another layer again with a bit of another color. And we are, like with the cylinder here, we are a bit turned like this. So you end up with the nose line here. And you are going to have the eye line, eyebrow line, and the hairline. And then, of course, at the other side, you are going to have a sort of a similar cutoff. Weight on the word similar. Is it actually attaching? It's attaching there, so it has to be symmetrical around the neck. So you actually probably have to move this a bit stage left so that I can have this around here. The thing is that when you're looking at the head from above, again, it is not actually round. It's sort of a cut off thing that you have the cranial bone, then you have the sides of the head, temples, you have the back of the head, and the ears somewhere around here. When you are looking at someone head on, you are able to see a small part of the side of the head head on. It's actually, I think this way around. Yeah. The skulls of children and women are less rounded than those of men. So this is something that might come as a surprise, as we think of men as more blocky. But what turns the skull rounded are the muscles around it. So when these muscles are not robust, you end up with retaining this sort of crystalline structure. I took a couple of courses in physical anthropology out of interest. And one of those, rule of thumb things to check for with a skeleton was to, sort of fan out your hands. So you have the other thumb of the other hand here, and check if it fits. So you would like to have that kind of an angle here instead of having it well rounded as I imagine my the back of my head is. So anyway, I am going to do some erasing here. And then draw it again. We need a center line. We can continue the center line to reach a level where we would like to have our chin beam. At this point, we are going to need, I'm going to turn off the sketch with the white lines here so that I can more easily, draw relatively detailed. Turn down the opacity on these layers as well. And now I'm going to get into this sort of, drawing domino masks and things of that nature, volume. There is the brow ridge. No, the brow ridge is nowhere near here. The brow ridge is here. All humans have a brow ridge. Women have generally have a smaller one. People who look like Neanderthals have a larger one. But everyone has some amount of brow ridge here. Depending on your nose, you might have a it might, after the brow ridge, it might come back strongly and then come forward again, or it might just start from the brow ridge. I think that I haven't seen any, side-on official art of Ina, so I don't know what she should have. But I think that when it turns back and starts up again, that it is more attractive that way. So I'm just going to draw more like my my ideal than, or I'm going to fill in the gaps with my ideal, so to say. Ah, I see you are back, Starfound. I'm glad that the bot shenanigans have not scared you away. If you remember from yesterday, for those who were here yesterday, I am sort of drawing the domino mask here. So this plane is above the cheekbone. And after that, you start getting into the cheekbone. Looking like a JoJo character, as I noted yesterday. Those newer here will not have heard that joke, but of course, once I talk about it, then you will know that it's not a spontaneous joke. And seems about fine. Then we have the teeth are going to protrude a little bit. That seems honestly more than necessary for this level. Then I am going to throw in a bit of the cranium here. So it's going to end up looking something like this. And I think the final component of the volume sketch is going to be having a bit of the hat here. And at that point, I'm probably going to merge all of these, since it seems that I'm running a bit low on energy for my computer. Another save. So at this point, where do we want to have our hat? It is going to be sitting on the head, something like this. That comes forward a bit. Does not obscure the eyebrows, which are going to be somewhere around here. The lines here are not technically the eyebrows, they are part of the brow ridge, so they are above where the actual eyebrows will be drawn in. And then we are going to have the brim to the hat, and this is going to be where it gets a bit difficult, since there have been some changes to the composition since the original sketch. There is going to be the joke is that there is wind. There's wind is coming from this side, so how is the hat going to be interacting with the wind? It is going to be blown up here. So if she is grabbing it here, as she has to be, since I've already drawn the hands, it is going to be flapping something like this. So we will actually have a so this part is going to be flapped up. So this is something that I will have to keep an eye on while shading. So this is going to be a part that's flapped up. There is also going to be a part of it that is, I think, if it flaps up on this side, it's probably going to do something similar, perhaps a little bit further behind her, since she is not going to be grabbing onto that side. So it might flap something like this. And it is going to have this dome here. And we are going to have the flaps coming out of the dome. Seems fine. And since I am going to be probably merging the sketch layer, I am going to copy some of my sketch work for the hair into another fresh layer. Now let's use a red again, since we are going to have some volume for the danglies and of course for the hair here. This has now been an hour and a half, and I'm getting exhausted again. So I think related to the part of the work related to the topic is pretty much done. I think combining the volumetrics light and shadow with some of the actual anatomy is going to be a good idea. Then I will be able to fill in the volume. It's probably going to take a couple of hours as well, and be a pretty nice streaming session. Here we have some freehand volumes again, like yesterday. So I am just scribbling a sort of crystal-esque cross section here. Not really making accurate measurements of it, but I am at the point where I want to be done, and I think in any case this will not be particularly necessary. I will have to do this better for a later layer anyway. We are going to have some volume for the bangs here as well. I might as well throw that in as well while I am still at it. That is going to be flapping in the wind as well, of course. Then we have the general volume of the hair back there, and the general volume of the hair is going to get larger as it flaps out and balloons. So it's going to be something like this, and up here it is going to be something like this. And then of course we might have some textile like flapping around here. Probably going to end up looking fine. So if I turn off the old sketch, I can probably merge all of these together. Actually, I'm going to save, and then I am going to start merging, and when I have merged things, I'm going to save a different copy. So if I want to return to these work layers, I will be able to do that. So merge with below, and they end up just being one layer, and then I have an extra layer that I can turn on and off for the hair, since the hair is supposed to go behind a lot of these things. But of course, as layers, it doesn't work that way, so it will obscure things if I merge everything together. So Now then, I'm going to eventually save this as a different file, but for now, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you to everyone watching after the fact on YouTube.